Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram and TikTok at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I'm a foodie fan on Instagram and on Twitter, and have a blog at foodiefan.com.
And this is episode, I believe this is 64, Jacob.
That's what you wrote, so I'm hoping that's correct.
So I am still in the United States. It's another sunny day in New York, but we'll talk a bit about that later. How have you been doing, Jacob?
Been very busy with work, and it's considered to be autumn now. So after Obon, it's considered to be autumn. So you already see, various autumn-themed things in the supermarkets, but it's still like 35 degrees outside, so it doesn't feel like autumn.
Yeah, it's you got the Halloween stuff out yet?
I haven't seen any Halloween stuff yet, but I've seen my curry flavored Kit Kat, so I think that's a sign that autumn is approaching.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course Japan takes the seasons very, very seriously. In case you haven't been to Japan, Halloween is the entire month of October, and then on November 1st, Christmas starts.
Yeah, the day after Halloween, exactly.
Everybody knows that, right?
And also, people actually do sometimes take a bit of time off during August, and I think that's one of the reasons why we don't have much in the way of like Japanese pen news in this episode.
But I think in this episode we'll have some things looking forward, right? Not things that have necessarily happened,
right?
But things are kind of getting into motion for the fall season. But we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, again, new acquisitions that we've kind of neglected for a while. But I'll start on my side after the DC Pen Show. So last time we talked, it had just been the end of, I believe, the Friday on DC Pen Show, and then I had Saturday and Sunday left. So the entire show went by like a flash. My butt didn't leave the chair, so I almost feel like I didn't even go to the show because I wasn't really able to see any of the other vendors. But I did manage to snag a few things. Not necessarily for my own personal use, but I think it's going to be, good for, quote unquote research, and also some fun things for Akane. So I got these, well, first of all, I had been talking to Ben Walsh from Gravitas Pens for quite a while now. And we are trying to work on a few projects together, but I managed to get 2 pens from Ben Walsh. The first one, well, they're both the little pocket pens, the small ones that really adorable, but the metal ones probably could be a weapon, given how pointy the ends are. I got 2 of those. The first one I got was one in polycarbonate. So this was the cleared frosted demonstrator, and that one is a blast. That one, I think, really does beg to be eyedroppered, whereas the other one has the rainbow coating on it, and I believe that one, I want to say is steel. But yeah, that one is also really, really cool.
I have 2 thoughts about what you said just now. The first thought is, I never seen you showing any pocket pens in your collection ever before. So why suddenly pocket pens?
I think particular to Gravitas, I think the pocket pen is the best design in terms of proportion. I think the other models, sometimes they have a really strong taper to the end. So I think this pocket pen in particular, I think, is really well balanced to me visually. And second of all, I think it's funny, and it's not true. I have shown one pocket pen in my collection before, and that is the Toma pen. And I have it for similar reasons.
Yeah, okay. Well, that doesn't really count. That one is just like a big joke in the best possible way.
I think the Ben Walsh design ones are very similar, because I don't have the size 8 sections, but you can put King of Pen nibs into one of these pocket pens. So I think the amusement factor, because usually pocket pens have really small nibs, but this one you can put a full size 6 nib in it, you can put stacked nibs in it, so I think it is quite fun and quite funny. And particularly for the polycarbonate one, I am planning on doing some lacquer, or experimenting with some lacquer on it, so stay tuned.
But so my second thought is about what you said about eyedropping. So I think everyone probably knows that eyedropping a pen is not without risk, and most people who have been eyedropping pens have a disaster story or two to tell. And if you're eyedropping a pocket pen, isn't that like a recipe for disaster?
So yeah, I think at least for this polycarbonate one, it has been designed to be eyedroppered. So there are copious amounts of O-rings. You put a little grease on there. I'm not too worried. I mean, I've eyedroppered Kaweco Sports before. So, yeah, let's just say I'm a risk taker.
But would you want to put this in your, like, let's say, like jeans pockets, especially in the winter where you go between like very cold and very warm?
Okay. Yeah, that assumes that I put my pocket pens in my pockets.
Isn't that sort of the whole paradigm?
No, I still keep them in my pen case. Yeah, but yeah, they're fun, and I believe you have a Gravitas pen as well.
Yeah, so I recently got one. I'm not sure what the model name is, but I guess like a full size, but in white Delrin. I think is that if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And the grip section is metal, but it's not slippery because it has these grooves, I guess, on them, which makes them quite grippy. So you get the best part of metal section, which is the white balance, without the slippery problems that you have with like a sailor metal section. So that part I like quite well. My particular pen has a bit of a cross-threading problem. I'm not sure if that is just my pen, because I have a sample size of 1, so I don't know if that happens to other people.
Yeah, but we'll play with them once I get back. And I have found that most of these parts are interchangeable. So it's funny also to see like a rainbow anodized section inside the frosted demo. Yeah, although the dimensions are slightly different, they are still interchangeable.
Okay. That allows for some interesting experiments, I guess.
Yeah. The other thing that I got from the DC Pen Show was this hand-painted Kaweco. Now, usually I'm not, too much into these Kawecos because I think they kind of look boring. All this controversy aside, I think they just look kind of boring. I mean, they're cute, but they're not that great writers. So I've never really personally invested in a Kaweco before. The only Kaweco that we have is the iridescent Kaweco, the iridescent pearl, which the material is cool. So we got that one. But there was a lady who was selling these hand painted Kawecos, and I have seen these online before, and these are just the most intricately drawn pens that I think totally transform the experience of even owning a Kaweco Sport. Have you seen these before?
Not before you did that Instagram post. So that was the first time I saw it. And I agree. I mean, these are absolutely beautiful. I'm sure that this takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to make these kind of um, paintings. My only question about that, and it sort of goes back to this whole thing about using a pocket pen as a pocket pen. This is not something you would want to put in your jeans pocket with your keys and with your phone, right?
Yeah, no, don't put these with your keys.
So my only question is, Jada, why? I mean, if you can do this kind of design, which again is absolutely beautiful, why do it on a pocket pen rather than with a full-size pen that people typically, put in like a pen case and treat more carefully than a pocket pen?
So that I actually do have an answer for.
Okay.
Um, the lady who does this is actually the wife of a Kaweco collector.
Ah, okay.
And the entire family, I guess, is they're lovers of Kaweco. And I've actually met this Kaweco lover before at kaweco.tin.box. Really nice guy. Yeah, and there seems actually to be quite a lot of Kaweco lovers in Turkey. They're, I suppose, relatively inexpensive. There are lots of different colors, so that makes them highly collectible. And so, yeah, I think just their love of, like, their family love of Kaweco, right? That is probably the reason why it's done on the Kaweco Sport.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. I am more positive to the Kaweco Sport than you are. Actually, I recently got 2 Kaweco Sports. My only problem with the Kaweco Sport is the nib. So normally, I mean, we talk often about swapping nibs, and these are number 5 size nib, but not all number 5 size nibs are equal, right? These are unusually short nibs. So in BOK terms, I think it's called 060. I think the reason to switch to Jova, but I think the length is the same as this BOK 060. So you can't just take nibs you think of as number 5 size nibs. They are too long, too tall to fit in a Kaweco Sport.
And that's exactly why I put a Pelican M400 gold nib in there.
Oh, so those fit? Interesting. Okay.
Those fit right on, no modifications to the feed. The trick is only to pop a M400 nib out.
But hold on, I think we talked before about how Pelican's M200 and M400 nibs are similar to Sailor's small nibs in that the diameter is like 5.5-ish. Isn't that the case?
Well, you know what I'm gonna try next then.
Okay.
Yeah, so I agree the nibs are less than stellar on Kavecos, but that doesn't mean there isn't a solution to it. And we'll be exploring more.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to say about these pens is that I think they're very similar to maki-e in the sense that the work is almost exactly the same, right? The process might be a little bit different, but it is still painstakingly difficult to work on such a small scale. And if you zoom in on the paintings, you'll see that they are just extremely delicate, extremely intricate. And one of these pens went for like $150. It's not bad.
That's very affordable for this kind of artwork. Yeah,
Yeah, so you
good
can
value.
really tell this is a labor of love more than anything.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't sound like something you would make a lot of money off giving, but what I assume is a lot of time to make this.
Yeah, but very happy to have met them, and I'm glad I was able to bring one of these back. Yeah, it was real good. All right. You got I believe this is a dip pen.
Yeah, so I went to Maruzen earlier today. I went there to get some Kobayashi inks actually. So for some reason, Maruzen is selling Kobayashi inks right now. I'm not quite sure why. There's some kind of ink event, I guess. But as I was heading toward, the cash register, I saw that they had this new Sailor Hokoro dip pen with a footer nib. I think we talked about that a few episodes ago. How Sailor recently released or launched a new two new nib options to their Hokoro lineup.
Mm-hmm.
So a 2 millimeter stub and a footer nib. So I actually been looking for these just like as recently as 1 week ago. I went to both Maruzen and Itoya and couldn't find them, and they were sold out on Maruzen. Sorry, on Amazon. So they've been hard to find, but they had them at Maruzen today, so I picked one up because I wanted to try them. And the short story is that I'm quite impressed. This dip pen is a lot nicer than I actually expected it to be. Um, so I think we have covered Hokoro before, but just short recap. I think was this Hokoro dip pens were launched first back in December last year. Initially were only available in fine and 1 millimeter stub, and then this year and this month they added, as we said, 2 millimeter stub and a footer to the lineup. And there are two things that are kind of unusual about these Hokoro dip pens. The first thing is that the nib unit is designed to be removable, so you could buy, for example, the one with a fine nib, and later on you decide you want to try a 2 millimeter stub. You can buy that nib unit separately, and you can very easily swap it. The other thing, which is perhaps even more interesting, is that the Hokoro pens actually come with a feed, which is, I think, is rather unusual for a dip pen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we talked about that a few weeks ago or a few episodes ago, and I think you mentioned that when we talked about Pilot Utsushi, and you said that Sailor's Hokoro actually has a feed, and I think I said then that I don't want a feed on my dip pen because if you think of a feed as a traditional fountain pen feed, then those tend to be difficult to clean, right? So if you buy a dip pen in order to be able to quickly test different inks, then the last thing you want is a hard to clean feed on it, right?
And now you've seen the light of day.
Yes, exactly, because it turns out that the feeds on these Hokoro nibs are actually specially designed just for this pen, and they're specifically designed to be easy to clean. Sailor says that you can just dip them in water, just like any other dip nib, and that's enough to clean them, and then you're ready to try a different ink. And that seems to be the case. So there's no really problem with these feeds. They are very easy to clean. But the big advantage, of course, with a feed is that it holds a lot of ink. So we talked recently, or I think I talked recently about Pilot's Iro Utsushi pens, and I think I said that with a medium nib at least, you dip it once and then you write like 2 lines and then it's out of ink, right? So it's not a very nice writing experience. By comparison, this Hokoro nib lets me write a full page, a full B5 page on a single dip. And I'm not talking about like a fine nib here. I'm talking about a footer nib, which is like a double broad. It lays down a lot of inks. And so you have a consistent ink flow and you can write a full page. Actually, you can probably write more because I ran out of paper before I ran out of ink. So I'm not sure what the limit is. But it really works well, and the nib is a lot of fun. So to no one's surprise, it's very similar to Sailor's Fooder de Mannen fooder nibs. So it's like more expressive than like a Pen BBS or D-like mini fooder, but it's not as extreme as say like a Jinhao or Duke, like big fooder nib. So it's sort of like a happy medium. You get this like a double broad brush-like strokes, and again you can write a full page. So it really works, and I'm impressed. Sailor has a winner here. Have you tried this one?
No, I haven't tried the Makoto itself, but I'm not surprised at your review because the feed does look real good, and I mean it's I think Sailor finally found a winner. Maybe in the low cost space, we know that they've not been particularly successful with the juniors. Um, we know that they've tried to be in this low cost space in quite a while, but yeah, taking advantage of the Ink Numa. I think they're the leaders of the big three in this Ink Numa trend. So no wonder they developed an excellent product for it because they really understand the that market, right?
Yeah, and this is definitely a more thoughtfully designed product than Pilot's Iro Utsushi, because Pilot's Iro Utsushi is really just like a standard nib holder with a Kakuno nib, as we have established before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't much to it, but here you have a special design feed, and you can also, and it's also portable in the sense that you can take the nib unit and you can insert it with a nib facing inward toward the barrel, right? So you don't actually need a cap, and it's very portable. So it's
Yep.
been a lot more thought going into this pen than in Pilot's Iro Sushi, I think. But it doesn't seem to be widely available. I did some Google search earlier today trying to find out, and it doesn't seem to be available in the West, at least. I saw some like web online stores in Singapore selling it. I'm not sure if that's grey import, but as far as I can tell, Sailor hasn't made much of an effort to sell this pen outside Japan yet. I'm not sure why. I'm hoping they will make it more available soon.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And yeah, and so going back to that Pilot Iro Utsushi, I think I said back then that Pilot Iro Utsushi is kind of an acceptable alternative to a glass pen if you can't get hold of a glass pen, but it's not quite the same experience. It's not quite as good, right? You would never choose a Pilot Iro Utsushi over a good glass pen if you have the choice. But here with this Sailor Hokoro, I would
Yeah.
choose this over I think any of my glass pens, because I have more fun using this dip pen than any of the glass pens I've tried so far. So I'm really impressed. I'm really enjoying this. I'm going to be using this little dip pen a lot.
I think the if you want to write, I feel like glass is not a soft material,
Right.
right? So it doesn't speak to your hand as a metal pen would.
Mm.
Um, so I think for writing, maybe. I think for swatching, what I've been doing is using one of those italic nibs, just taking a quick pass and then writing the name underneath, and I find that that works
Mm.
really, really well. But I think yeah, you're right. If you're doing writing,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think you still can't beat a metal nib.
But I think that's one of the differences between the like ink pen community in Japan and broadly in the West, because if you think about, at least in the fountain pen community, when people talk about dip pens, they talk about pens they use just for ink swatch and just to write the name of the ink and then they do a swatch and that's it, right? But I think in Japan it's more common to actually use the glass pens or use the dip pens for writing and for drawing, right? So you dip it once and you do like a full drawing on a page, or you write a full letter with your dip pen instead of using a fountain pen. So I think the user's pattern is actually different. So it's more important for the Japanese user's pattern to actually be able to write a lot on a single dip.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Alrighty, so shall we move to some pen news?
While we are kind of on topic of Maruzen, so let me continue on that thread. So as I said, I went to Maruzen earlier today and I asked them again, as I have every few weeks now, if there's going to be a pen show, a Maruzen pen show in this autumn. So last time Shishikura kind of indirectly
Mm-hmm.
confirmed it by telling me that it's going to be this lemon pen, right? But she didn't
Yep.
like explicitly tell me that's going to be an autumn event. This time they actually confirmed it and even gave me the date. So from September 14th to September 20th is is the date for this year's Marathon Autumn Pen event.
September 14th to... Sorry, September
20th.
Oh, okay. And that's going to be
Yes.
held at the 2 locations, right?
So they only said Marathon, sorry, they only said Nihonbashi. I'm not sure if they didn't know about Marunouchi or if they misunderstood my question, but they only said Nihonbashi.
Okay. But there are 2 pens.
They didn't want to elaborate on what pens going to be available, so all I have is the information from Shishikura last time that there's going to be 2 Shishikura pens, one sold by Shishikura herself, and 1 lemon pen sold via Marathon. I'm assuming, just based on history, that there's going to be a pilot pen as well, but they weren't willing to tell me about that.
All right.
I have to wait for the postcard.
Okay, so we'll see what the postcard says, but that should be very soon.
Yeah.
All right, next topic. We kind of talked about this before, but in my article, in my Wancha article, we mentioned a quote unquote company called Penwing Stationery. Now, Penwing Stationery is owned by Wancha. Okay, I think that line has been clearly established. And Penwing Stationery is known for taking decals and stickers from places like Rakuten Market, putting them on pens, and then doing a quick lacquer finish and calling them modern maki-e. So they're saying that they are urushi pens. They actually say they're practitioners of urushi arts. And the thing about Penwing Stationery is that the prices were unbelievable, right? Like, we're talking about prices that are almost the same as a retail price on some of these pens. So it was literally a too good to be true situation. So on my article, I included them in the expose and showed various different photos that show that they are in fact using $7 decals, slapping them on pens, and then passing them off as urushi. I think it's been about a month, maybe a month and a half since that. Penwing Stationery has sent out an email to, I suppose, their subscribers. It says, after our 30% off special buy 2022 summer campaign ends, we have decided to forever close a store, with a crying emoji. Started 5 years ago from selling fountain pens in eBay to owning an online store that customized fountain pens with urushi arts from our local artisans. We are proud to say that we had a journey. We are proud to say that what a journey we've had. We've had people who truly appreciate our work and service to people who shamed us for not delivering the same quality as the maki and other maki establishments. What we've done now and in the past was never to scam or fool our customers. We do not overcharge, and we give the price our customers wanted and a price that can support our local artisans. And we try to be as much transparent as we can. We only desire to see the artistic pen market expand and increase, giving customers more and more beautifully made pens with more affordable price and faster delivery service. Who knows? I may return to customizing fountain pens in the past. But as of today, I have decided to close this chapter and focus on the next chapter ahead. Thank you, our loyal customers and supporters. From the beginning, your support always meant the world to me. We love you, and you can always contact us if your pen needs repair or replacements. Thank you, Eishi Yasu. What do you think?
I think this part is the key. What we have done now and in the past was never to scam or fool our customers. If you are closing your business, shutting down your business because there's no profitability, or you want to do something else, or something like that, you would never write this. You would never write this unless you are being accused of this, right? So I think that sentence is the key to this whole thing. Why would you write this unless you're being accused of scamming or fooling your customers?
Oh, well, I did accuse them of scamming and fooling their customers.
It may be all your fault then.
um, well, I think the previous sentence is also quite key to this. It says, blah blah blah, people who've shamed us for not delivering the same quality as Namiki or other maki establishments. I think there are two key points here. First of all, the sentence appears to be a claim from Penwing Stationery to try to place themselves as a maki establishment. And second of all, I think the wording, people shamed us for not delivering the same quality as Namika. I don't think people were shaming them for not delivering the same quality as Namiki, right? Nakaya doesn't have the same quality as Namiki.
Now you're into controversial territory.
No, I mean, we're being realistic. Not many brands can be the same quality as Namiki, right?
Sure.
I'd argue that most Urushi artists out there who are working on pens are not the same level as Namiki, because Namiki are just the best. So I think there's a bit of ego and a bit of self pity in this article or this email, which I do not think is necessarily justified. But that goes into the part that you have talked about, right? What we've done now in the past was never to scam or fool our customers. So, I think that at the best, we can kind of, how do I put this? At best, I think we can give them the benefit of the doubt, and we can say they might not have had the intention to scam their customers. They might have intended to do the best things, but by virtue of placing stickers and calling them maki-e and actually describing themselves as maki-e establishment, is, in fact, scamming and fooling customers, especially when you're not transparent about what that art is. And I think the second thing is we do not overcharge and we give our price the customers wanted. The prices were really unbelievable. I mean, the prices were like $10 above retail price. So that begs the question, how did they get these pens? We know that the business culture here is such that Pilot, Sailor, Platinum, they would never sell their pens to people who do aftermarket customization. Otherwise, we talked to Style Art about this, right? I mean, Style Art, they can't even get nibs. So there's just no way that that these guys would be able to get pens from these big manufacturers without going through Wancher, which is their parent company. Might be even the same people. So I think there are so many questions here that lack that transparency for them to claim that they have been as much transparent as they can be. The whole thing sounds like, you know, the ruse was uncovered. It blew up. People started complaining. People started writing in, and from what I see, it probably became untenable for Penwing Stationery. And this is not an article that you would write. I mean, you might say, right? You might say, if you're Penwing Stationery, you might, you know, deny the accusations. Like, for example, you know, Twisby and Narwhal, right? You know, they both denied that they were copying each other, blah, 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 blah. But you don't shut down your business for this if it's still financially viable, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to this sentence where they say, you know, our intention was not to scam or fool our customers. To me, the only possible interpretation is that they are shutting down the business because they have so many customer complaints and accusations that it becomes untenable.
And so this thing, it said, I have decided to close this chapter and focus on the next chapter ahead. Kind of leads me to assume that there will be a next chapter. So I'm going to stay vigilant. Keep an eye out for similarly made, Squarespace websites or whatever they're using, Shopify websites.
So while we are on the topic of lack of transparency, one thing that is interesting and quite unusual about both Penwings and Pensacci's website is that there is no information about who the seller is. I mean, sure, it says Penwing Stationery and it says Pensacci, but those are not names of legal entities, right?
Yes.
And if you go to the About page, it says, you know, we are Pensacci, we are Penwing Stationery. But again, that is not a legal entity. There's no company with that name, and there's no
registration
mention of the individuals involved, which is so interesting because if you go to almost any Japanese online store, even your smallest like mom and pop store on like Base or Shopify, if you scroll down a bit, it's going to be a page that says notation in accordance with Act of Specified Commercial Transactions, because there's a law in Japan. There's a law in Japan that says that if you have an online store and if you sell to domestic customers, you have to specify a number of things, including who the seller is, what is the address, what is the means of payment, return policy, and so on. Now, I think they get away with it, both Pensacci and Penwing, because they probably don't sell to any domestic customers. But I think it's still interesting that they never mention anywhere who they are. Who are the people behind this? What is the organization, if any, behind this?
Well, if you look at the Pensacci About Us page, right, it says that how we made Pensacci. My name is Ken Katsumoto. They have like names, so even this guy just now in the Penwing bye letter, it says his what do you say he was? It says he is Eishi Yasu, and so they have names.
To me, the first time I've seen that name, I don't think you can find that name on Penwing Stationery's website.
On Penwing Stationery's website, no. But I think what's to the point is that they don't have registries, right? And again, as you said, even the smallest stores, they'll say, complying with whatever law, and sometimes you'll have like or you're supposed to have your business address on there. You're supposed to have a registration number because, as everybody knows, Japan is the land of registration. And I did point this out. It is so strange that these quote unquote companies have no registration, but then they build themselves as corporations. They're not saying that they're an individual person selling stuff, right? It's not like Anitol, the guy that makes crabs, the crab stands, the crab pen stands, right? He's a dude who's making this and painting this and selling them outside. They're actually trying to build themselves as fully fledged e-commerce websites, and I think even JP Select has this, compliant with whatever blah 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 law.
Exactly. You can see, if you go to JP Select's website, you can see that they are based in Yokohama and so on. They are required to put that information there. But that information is absent from both Penwings and Pensarge's website.
Yeah. So, again, really just... I wouldn't say that the stuff that you get from them are, let's say... how do I say this? They're not like... you're going to get a real pilot. You're going to get a real sailor pen. It's not some counterfeit pen. In the case of Pen Wing, you might get some counterfeit Urushi, but like the base products themselves, they're real. They're real pens. But just this connection, this behind the doors, behind the scenes kind of activity, it's just so suspicious.
We talked before about this Rakuten store, Honey Hunt, right? Or Pen Life / Honey Hunt. The reason why we know that store is owned by Mr. Wancher, Taizo Okagaki, is because he is required by law to disclose that information. So you go to Rakuten, you go to that store, you go to like the about section, and it's there right there. It says Representative Taizo Okagaki, and it says this Bungo Takada, because he's required by law to put that information there. So that's how we're able to make that link.
Yep. And you found something interesting as well, because we are in the article I talked about this company THC, which was this mysterious company that
right.
wasn't based in Japan, and I didn't bother writing this part in the article, but Taizo Kagaki actually first registered his business in the United States because it was easier to get a business license in the United States, and then he moved Wancher eventually over to Japan. But Honey Hunt is apparently still registered in the United States in Honolulu. So I suppose they would also be subject to U.S. law, at least Honey Hunt, right? Not necessarily Wancher, but Honey Hunt themselves, or the website that's selling stuff on Rakuten on behalf of Wancher.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. That's some Pen Wing stationery drama for you all. Onto a few more news items. We have a new stationery event at Mitsukoshi, and this is, I believe, I want to say it's hosted by Stationery Station, or maybe they're just part of it. But the event name is Nihon no Monozukuri, and Stationery Station, they call this a stationery fair, which just means that there are a lot of vendors that bring their stuff in, they sell stuff. And I believe we had a stationery event hosted by Stationery Station, the Ink event, I believe this spring, not long after they opened. And this will be the second stationery event hosted by them in a long time, right?
To me, the most interesting thing is if you look at the dates, and if you remember what I just said about the Maruzen event dates, exactly the same.
They overlap.
Exactly the same, the 14th to the 20th.
Yep. And so it seems like it sounds like Mitsukoshi is really trying hard to get back into the stationery game. I think that's good. And you know what? They're going to have Toyoka Craft, which is huge. And then they're going to have Guri Kobo, which is more glass pens. Look at the other companies. It's more towards the casual stationery side. I would say like Arisa and Akamegane. Like that's more like stamps. More, this is some these are stores that you see at Bungajoshi.
This is a slightly different audience than the people who would go to this Maruzen event, because again, Maruzen will have Shishikura pens and most likely pilot pens, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to compete with that. It's a slightly different niche.
But I think that this Mitsukoshi event will be. I don't know about the sales numbers, but at least they will draw huge crowds, way bigger than the Maruzen event.
Oh, you think so? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because these names, I mean, if you've seen people who try to buy this stuff at Bungajoshi, it's wild. Shall we go on to the next topic?
Sure.
All right, so there's been rumblings, and ever since we did our episode on Tomoe River, people have been asking. So it's been like a year now, right? People have been asking, what's Hobonichi gonna use now that Tomoe River is gone? And last year, so meaning 2022, Hobonichi was still on the old number 7 Tomoe River. Obviously, they can't use that forever, right? So on the 23rd of August, they're actually going to have an announcement about Tomoe River.
But aren't they kind of revealing what's going to happen in the short description already? The Tomoe River paper for the Techo. There is only one Tomoe River right now. I mean, what what else can it be?
So I don't think that they're gonna say, oh yeah, it's not Tomoe River anymore. But I think it'll be interesting to see how they frame it, because I think a lot of the audience for Hobonichi is not necessarily the fountain pen community. Sure, a subset use fountain pens, but I think they have a much wider audience, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they bill this Tomoe River. I believe they should be on Sanzen now, and I think, yeah, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, most people aren't going to be able to tell the difference.
And as we established in the previous episode, many of the Hobonichi users are probably also Pilot Friction fans. So I wonder if they're going to phrase it in terms of friction friendliness.
Yeah. So I'm not really following the other events, but this event I wanna see.
Yeah, could be interesting. And the only thing that could be surprising if they don't use quote unquote stock Sans and Tomoe River S, but something customized for them. I don't think that would happen, but it's a possibility.
If that happens, then there'll be big news and we'll be all excited.
Yeah, because related to that, we have talked about this Iroful paper by Sakai Technical Paper, which seems remarkably similar to Cosmo Air Light. Yep. But apparently, or at least I've seen some ink swatches that suggest it's not exactly the same. So I wonder if that's also a case where there might be some slight customization for one company. In fact, next weekend, there's this big Inkunuma event in Shinjuku, and both Alessa and I are going, and Sakai Technical Paper is going to be there. I'm going to be pressing them about information about Iroful and if there's any difference between Iroful and Cosmo Air Light, and if so, what's the deal? Do they have some kind of special customization, or is it just marketing?
Excellent. So we'll be looking forward to that episode. All right. Now a little bit about the US. I had the opportunity to work at several different stores. We held grinding events across the country, and last weekend I was at Dromgool Stationery, and this weekend I was at Yoseka, and it was a lot of fun. I'm very humbled to be invited by Dromgools and Yoseka to use their space. and to help their customers work on their pens. I don't really talk about my grinding on the podcast a lot, but I thought, this. I met a lot of podcast listeners at these events, and I think I talked a little bit about this last time, but it is really surreal when you look at the statistics, right? On, you know, we see the statistics of the podcast. When you look at the statistics, it's like, oh, you know, 2,000 people listen to the podcast. It's just a number, and you think, oh, 2,000, that's not that much. But then when you're at these events, and customer after customer after customer, they're just telling you, oh, I listen to the podcast. People are like, oh, I listen to it religiously. It's the first thing that I do, and it is a really humbling experience. But yeah, the two events were very successful. I never left the table almost at either events, and it was a great time. I got to work on a lot of different pens. There was one gentleman who was about 91 years old, and his wife had passed away. But about 60 years ago, I think he said 1962, his wife bought him a Lamy 2000, and the pen always wrote too thick for him. So he had it sent to Lamy twice to swap out the nibs, but it was still, even the EF was too thick. So he had asked me to grind the nib down so that he can use it again, and it would be a good way to remember his late wife. And imagine working on a pen like that. I worked on a lot of expensive pens, but none that gave me as much butt clenching as that one. So yeah, really humbled. There's, I think, the difference between the US stores and the Japanese stores, I would say, is and I think it reflects also in terms of like the culture too, but there's a lot of sense of community in these stores. So I think the only store that's really close to replicating that is Bunga Box, where you go to Bunga Box, and some folks who know each other will be like, oh, hi, and they'll have a discussion. But that's not something that you really see at other shops. Like, definitely not at Shosaikan, definitely not at Maruzen. But over there, or over here, I suppose, where I am right now, even customers who don't really know each other, they'll sit at my table, waiting for their grind note. They'll be like, oh, what's going on? And they'll strike up a conversation, show each other what they've bought, their latest and greatest. And yeah, there was a real sense of community, both in Dromgools and in Yoseka. So I thought that was really nice. Yoseka in particular, I think, is, we've talked about the store for quite a long time now. It's the first time for us to see physically the shop, and it's very impressive. And I was talking to one of the customers, and I said, this is where vision meets execution. The store is incredibly well done. It's incredibly well done, Jacob. If the store was in Japan, it would be probably one of the top 3 stores in Japan. So it's, hats off to the team at Yoseka. Hats off to Daisy and Neil, who obviously had a fantastic, beautiful vision for their store, and for everybody in the staff who's helped make this come to life. Because when you're in the shop, you don't feel like you're in the United States. You don't feel like you're in Brooklyn. You feel like you're in a different world. And there's all this Asian stationery there. You can try everything, and it's really an experience. So I really hope that you get to come out here to see Yoseka one day, maybe in the future. We'll have a podcast podcast adventure. But
That'll be fun.
yeah, it was really cool.
I would imagine that Yoseka is a bit more like Asia focused than Drumgolds. So if that is correct, was that in any way reflected in the kind of nib grinds that people were asking for? Or put it differently, were more people asking for like Naginata style grinds at Yoseka than at Drumgolds?
So what's interesting about let me talk about drum goals first. Drum goals um looks like an office supply store that is filled with fountain pens. Um, this is not necessarily a negative, but it looks more close to the kind of kind of like a, I suppose, standard stationery store that you'd find in Japan, where there are lots of display cases, uh, lots of fantastic pens, but everything is behind a case. And of course, you can ask people to take out. So it looks more like Maruzen, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing, and they have obviously a lot of customers, but um, I think for Drum Ghouls, a lot of people came in because they were listeners of the podcast, um, and I got these like cursive italic stubs, architects, blah blah blah. But a lot of people also came in and be like, hey, I just want your specialty. I want something that you're known for. But at Drum Ghouls, most people, and this goes into a little bit about the next topic. Most people were grinding Yogo nibs, and sometimes Bach nibs. So instead of full naginata, the most you can really do is like a mini naginata. But I would say maybe like 20% to 30% was that. At Yoseka, I would say maybe 60% of the people knew me from the podcast, and 40% of the people signed up because they saw Yoseka do a video about the event, and they saw it on the Yoseka newsletter, and that was different. So I got to meet a lot of people who have not necessarily been exposed to the podcast. Got to chat with a lot of folks out here in New York, and there were a lot of I want this pen to write a bit wetter. And one thing that surprised me is that in Japan, when we buy pilot nibs, I feel like every pilot nib is just perfect. But here I've seen a lot of pilot nibs that are just so tight that ink doesn't come out. So I did a lot of like these ink flow adjustments. I did a lot of like smoothing. So yeah, that was different. That was different. And that brings me to the next little bit here, which is, I'm sure you've got this question a lot over the years as well, but the age-old debate between gold nibs and steel nibs. Have you been asked this?
But I'm not as opinionated about that as you are. I'm more agnostic. I'm happy with either.
So, a lot of folks might not realize, but in Japan, 99% of the nibs I grind are gold. Because it doesn't make sense to ask me to go buy a steel nib, grind it, and then, send it to wherever it is. So 99% of the nibs I grind are gold. And I never realized how lucky I was to grind gold nibs. Steel nibs, they're fine. They're perfectly fine. But there is, I think, a difference. And before this trip, I wasn't really able to pin my finger, directly on it. But I think gold is a responsive metal. It really reacts to the pressure that's placed on it, and it returns to its position easier. So I think it's easier to adjust a gold nib for like misalignment and stuff like that because it kind of bounces back to where it was, and you can slowly go about it. Steel, once you bend it, it's bent. It doesn't return to its position, and in a way, I feel like that demands an even lighter hand in order to use a steel nib for longer. So I think a gold nib is really great. It's responsive to the way that you write with it, whereas a steel nib asks more that you really take care not to push it too much. You really take care. And once it's pushed, it doesn't come back. So there's less leeway, and I think it makes sense then that gold nibs are easier to repair. When you think about like bent nibs, it's a lot easier to straighten a gold nib than a steel nib, because the nib is just more responsive to that kind of work. So I did want to address this, and I think the tipping on gold nibs are always, I think, very stable, whereas I have had a few steel nibs where the tipping is chipped off. So just an interesting observation that I've had over the past 3 or 4 weeks. Obviously now grinding a lot of steel nibs here.
But one thing I've noticed about, say, if you go to Nagahara's Twitter feed, or if you go to the pen shows when he's grinding, it's not uncommon to see people asking Nagahara to grind like Kakunos or Procyon or all kinds of pens where the cost of the pen is less than the cost of the nib grind. I don't think that's that uncommon here.
Yeah. I see Nagahara-san doing that quite a lot, and he has a bunch of like preppies and kakunos on his table, right? But I think, do they ask him to grind like I don't see people asking him to like actually grind stuff. It's more like maybe stuff that he's pre-ground, or because with a kakuno nib you can't really do much even with a kakuno nib, right? Like you can do like a fude.
But that's exactly what I've seen. People asking him to do fudes on like kakunos and procyons.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense, but you're paying more for the grind than for the pen.
Yeah. But then with a fude nib, you're not really, I suppose there's like, it's more of shaping the nib itself rather than grinding the tipping. So I don't know. Obviously Nagahara does the Franklin Christoph pens, so he's obviously doing steel nibs as well. But yeah, it's definitely, I think, more palatable if you are if you're not paying extra for the shipping costs. And because you can buy kakunos in the United States, so nobody would ask me to go buy them a kakuno and ship it over. Whereas in Japan, like you wouldn't have a kakuno sent to, let's say, Mark Bacchus and then have it sent back, right? So I think that's quite similar. And even here, the grind does cost more than a nib, even for the steel nibs here, right? Because steel nib costs like what, $15-20. So yeah, I think it's more about that shipping issue.
So I have a whole different question about your nib grinding, because I think you are at the crossroads where you need to decide whether what you're doing here is a side hustle or your like main gig. And in the latter case, if this is going to be your full-time job, is Japan the best place to be, or are most of your customers in the US? Would it make more financial sense for you to be in the US and go to the various retailers in the US?
Yeah, so there's definitely more of a market here, but I'll be in Japan, and there's more to the business than grinding. I think grinding is a launching pad for me. I hope I'm not full-time grinding in 20 years. I wanna run the business, right? And the thing with grinding is that you can only do so many in a day, which means that it's almost like Urushi in the sense that you've capped your earnings potential. So you can earn more, but you're not like eating or sleeping. So there is a vision of doing more. There is a vision of being in the space, and that vision does involve me being in Japan. And spending, several months in the US, several months in Europe. So I might not be in Japan for 12 months out of the year, but at least, 6 months, 6 to 9 months. That is the vision. And there is a plan, but I won't tell everybody the vision and the plan here.
Right.
We'll talk about this offline, but yeah, I want to be in Japan, and I think being in Japan has a lot of various different advantages. The biggest one being that you are in the land of stationery, and a lot of people listen to this podcast because we have so much access to information.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
Okay, last quick thing that I want to touch on is that next weekend is the San Francisco Pen Show, and I believe there are only 4 major podcasts about pens and overall stationery right now. There is the Pen Addict, obviously, the Big Daddy. There's the Stationery Cafe, which is more general stationery and journaling focused. There's the Goulet Pencast, which is more business focused, as in running a business. And then there's us, which is Japan focused. We'll all be in a room together next Saturday, San Francisco time, to record a 40-minute, or I don't know if we're going to record, but it's going to be a 40-minute talk show / panel where we answer listener questions. And this,
who are we in this context?
yes, so it's organized right now by April from Penguins Creative.
Okay.
And it'll have April Kelly from the Stationery Cafe. It will have Brad Dowdy from the Pen Addict.
Okay.
It will have Drew Brown from the Goulet Pencast, and I will be there from Tokyo Inklings.
Okay.
So it's like the it's like the Avengers mashup of pen podcasts. So that will happen next Saturday. And Brad Dowdy has done a post about it as well, I think. So check the post for details.
So this is going to be some kind of live streaming video.
I don't know if we're going to be able to live stream. Hopefully we'll be able to. Hopefully we'll be able to even record it. I'm not sure about the audio quality, but I think this is very cool. I will certainly try to have it recorded, but it's gonna be fun. Yeah, it's gonna be cool. And if you haven't already, check out this week's Goulet Pencast. I talk for like 30 minutes on it. I think I'm on like another one in a few weeks. So yeah, check that out. And also I was on Yoseka's What's in Your Pen Case this week. So if you have the time, please check it out.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Actually, related to that though, there seem to be fewer pen podcasts now than before. Like some of them have been just, I don't know, I'm not sure if they are just stopped or if they're just on like, I'm not sure what's going on. I really miss
indefinite hiatus.
I really missed the nib section, and then there was FPC. I'm not sure what's going on with that one. Was it Bent Tynes and then two guys, and I'm sure I'm missing someone. There's also a Stationary Orbit, I think. And then there's one in Spanish that looking at the Instagram posts, it always seems so interesting, but I don't understand it in Spanish. So I wish I could listen and follow that podcast, but my Spanish is not good enough.
So I talked to Annabelle Hiller. She works at Appleboom as their nib specialist, and she was on FPC. I think the organization just got too much. Because they had like 5 different people on the podcast. It just got too much. So I don't think that's coming back anytime soon. Ben Tynes, they say, and Inky Cat writes she's a doctor, so she's busy saving lives. Unlike us, we're busy ruining lives, spending other people's money. But no, that's a joke, guys. We are not ruining lives. But yeah, I think she was saying that she wanted to find an editor to help her out. And yeah, it's just gotten too busy where they don't have time to edit the podcast. And yeah, I'm not sure about the nib section, but there sure were a lot more pen podcasts back then There's one now that we haven't really mentioned. It's called Fountain Pen and Stationery, and there are two guys, Frank and Collins, who's running that podcast. And sometimes I do listen to that. Actually, I listen to all their episodes, but and then there's like Penboy Roy, I think, but I don't really listen. Yeah, I'm not as in tune with the Penboy Roy podcast. But yeah, there's them. But I think in terms of and there's Anderson Pens. Anderson Pens does their podcast, but it's very much, I think, focused more around the commercial. At least that one episode that I heard. But otherwise, I think the ones with the biggest followings are definitely the four that are going to be at the SF Pen Show. Oh, and there's also the Pen Turns, but that's more of like a pen making podcast.
Right. Yeah, I haven't listened to that one yet, but I've heard about it.
Yep. So I think that's it. That's been a relatively long episode. And we did have a listener question that we'll get into maybe next episode.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think that's a wrap. Jacob, anything else you want to add?
No, I'm hungry. I need to go have some dinner.
Oh yes, it's late in Japan, so
yes.
Please go and nourish yourself.
I will.
All right. Okay, thank you everybody so much for again tuning into episode 64. We really appreciate everybody's support, and as I have said, I've been meeting a lot of you out here at these events, and it is very humbling. And thank you all so much for coming up and saying hello. Please don't hesitate if you see us out in the wild, whether it be in the United States or it be in Japan. Don't be a stranger. Come up and say hi. I'm not going to know who you are, so please tell me your Instagram handle. I get a lot of hi, I'm John. I listen to the podcast, and my reaction is always like, hi, John. Really nice to meet you. What's your Instagram handle? So yeah, come up, say hi. Let us know who you are. And we're always really happy to meet you. Make sure to tell a friend, spread the word of the podcast, and we'll see you next time. My name is CY. You can find me at my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram and TikTok at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I'm Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter. I have a blog at foodafan.com.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.